She had unparalleled beauty and youth. Yet her father unexpectedly sold her off to a man nearly 60 years old to settle a debt. The old man was not only influential but also incredibly wealthy. His fortune could rival nations. Soon, the house was filled with relatives and friends who came to congratulate them, all praising this prestigious and promising match. But Angélique felt nothing but resentment, anger, and helplessness. She locked herself in the stable, venting her frustration at the unfairness of her fate. Her cousin, who had grown up with her, came to console her. He told Angélique that aside from the man's old age, a scar on his face, and a limp, there was nothing wrong with him. He added that for a man, what mattered was not his looks or age, but his status and wealth. But Angélique, unwilling to bow to fate, begged her cousin to save her. Yet, her cousin told her that it was too late, and the only choice was to accept it. In her moment of helplessness, the family's coachman suddenly appeared before her. The coachman had secretly admired Angélique for a long time, and now he seized the opportunity to confess his love, saying he would take her far away to escape it all. Although Angélique had always been close to the coachman, she considered him nothing more than a brother. She immediately rejected his confession, but then a plan to escape occurred to her. She believed that if she gave her virginity to the coachman, her unseen elderly fiancé would surely reject her, and the marriage would be called off. To change her fate, Angélique threw herself at the coachman. The coachman, who had always admired her, had no resistance and accepted her advances. But just as things were about to happen, Angélique's father suddenly arrived. Angélique's furious father immediately drew his sword, ready to kill the coachman for daring to disrespect him. Angélique desperately intervened to save the coachman's life. She promised her father that she would marry as planned and stop causing trouble. The coachman, unwilling but forced to leave, gave Angélique one last reluctant glance before hurrying off. And so, Angélique got into the wedding carriage, headed toward an unknown fate. Finally, she met her future husband, Peyrac. He was a man nearing 60 with a scarred face and a limp, but he was remarkably fresh-looking and energetic. To make him call off the wedding, Angélique insisted on listing all her flaws, but Peyrac remained unmoved and insisted the ceremony go forward. At the wedding, Angélique refused to wear the beautiful dress Peyrac had prepared for her, hoping to anger him into canceling the marriage. But Peyrac simply smiled calmly, unbothered, and the ceremony continued. Reluctantly, Angélique moved forward, her mind already plotting her next move. But Peyrac quietly told her, "No matter what you do or say, I won't get angry, and I won't cancel the marriage. So please, stop wasting your efforts." Seeing through her plans, Angélique fell silent and completed the wedding ceremony. That night, after the ceremony, Angélique hurriedly tried to barricade the bedroom door, hoping to keep Peyrac away. She lay in bed, enjoying the rare peace, only to be startled when Peyrac suddenly emerged from the nearby cupboard. It turned out the cupboard hid a secret escape tunnel, one Peyrac had prepared in advance. Panicking, Angélique jumped out of bed and backed away from him, warning him not to think he would get anything from her. Even if he forcibly took her body, he would never have her heart. Angélique expected a violent confrontation, but Peyrac didn't force himself on her. Instead, he comforted her, telling her not to be afraid. He promised that as long as she didn't agree, he wouldn't touch her, not even a finger. Still, Angélique couldn't sleep all night, uneasy and exhausted until dawn. Since Peyrac allowed Angélique free access to his study, one day she decided to pass the time by reading some books. She came across books about Galileo and Copernicus, books that were banned in the religiously controlled era. Angélique, a devout believer, questioned Peyrac on why he kept such forbidden books. Peyrac, who had never believed in religion and sought intellectual freedom, explained that these so-called forbidden books expanded the mind and allowed people to see the world differently. Peyrac also encouraged her to read the books whenever she had time, as it would be very beneficial. Angélique, raised with the church's baptism and teachings, naturally refused to read those books condemned as forbidden by the church. However, she did not report Peyrac's act of secretly keeping forbidden books to the church. What Angélique didn't expect was that Peyrac took her to a hidden gold mine, a secret he had kept from everyone. Angélique finally understood why Peyrac had an endless supply of money. Peyrac revealed his greatest secret to Angélique, laying it bare before her. Although his openness and disregard for secrets didn't win Angélique's heart, it still moved her somewhat. Seeing Angélique fondly holding a gold coin, Peyrac curiously asked her about it.
Alors vous rend rêveuse.
Est-ce que l'on peut en faire?
Et vous en feriez quoi?
J'affréterai une goélette et je partirai sur les mers. à la recherche d'un homme.
Angélique's words immediately plunged Peyrac into despair. He realized that the person Angélique was searching for might be the very reason she had never accepted him. That night, Peyrac quietly sent a trusted maid to find out who the rival for Angélique's heart was. After some inquiries, it was revealed that Angélique was searching for her brother, who had run away 14 years ago and hadn't been heard from since. The next day, Peyrac had Angélique's bags packed for her, gave her many gold coins, and handed her a collection of nautical maps he had kept for years. He supported her search for her brother, even saying, "I know you don't want to marry me, and if you leave and never return, I won't force you, I just want you to be happy." Peyrac's days of companionship, his kind and gentle care, and his help in fulfilling her wish to find her brother, even letting her go freely, melted Angélique's hard heart. Angélique couldn't help but shed a tear. She sat in the carriage, tightly clutching the nautical map, fantasizing about reuniting with her brother. But just then, a loud explosion came from Peyrac's room. Panicked, she rushed out of the carriage and toward the explosion site, only to find Peyrac lying on the ground, unmoving. Although she had been sold to Peyrac by her father to settle a debt, Peyrac had treated her with nothing but care and respect for days. Seeing Peyrac injured, Angélique finally realized that the nearly 60-year-old man had slowly made his way into her heart. For the first time, she kissed Peyrac on the forehead, and this gesture rekindled hope for love in Peyrac, who had almost given up, just when Peyrac thought all his efforts were finally paying off. Another unexpected turn of events occurred. To celebrate his survival, many of Peyrac's friends and family came to congratulate him, and he hosted a grand party for them. During the event, he received an anonymous letter, telling him that his wife Angélique was secretly meeting with her lover by the fountain in the backyard. Furious, Peyrac rushed to the fountain and found Angélique there with a man, meeting in secret. What he didn't know was that Angélique had also received a letter, telling her that Peyrac was in danger. The letter invited her to the fountain to meet and find out who was behind it. Worried about Peyrac's safety, Angélique ran to the fountain to meet the man. Just as Angélique arrived, Peyrac followed behind, and upon seeing him, the man immediately tried to kiss Angélique. Angélique quickly explained, but an enraged Peyrac didn't listen. What followed was a fair duel between the two men. The rival had carefully orchestrated everything to have a legitimate duel with Peyrac, hoping to eliminate him in the process. But what they didn't anticipate was that although Peyrac was nearly 60 and had a crippled leg, his swordsmanship was still formidable. In no time, he killed the man in front of him. That night, Angélique sat in front of the mirror in silence. She had never imagined that Peyrac would fight a life-or-death duel for her. The duel struck Angélique deeply, and at that moment, she could no longer deny that she had fallen in love with this older man who was willing to fight for her. She went to Peyrac to explain, but Peyrac, now calm, had already realized it was a plot set up by his rival. Angélique finally made up her mind. She would stay with Peyrac for the rest of her life. 3 months into their marriage, they finally shared their first intimate night. After one night of passion, Angélique found the love she had been missing in this marriage that had originally been forced upon her to settle her father's debts. Years passed in the blink of an eye, and the couple, now with children, was living a peaceful and happy life. But they did not expect that their enemy's conspiracy would resurface. One day, the king, while traveling, passed by and decided to rest temporarily at Angélique and Peyrac's castle. The sudden arrival of the king surprised and delighted Angélique and Peyrac. They hurriedly donned their finest clothes and lined up to welcome the king. The first thing the king said upon arriving was, "I've heard a little about your wealth." Sharp-eyed Peyrac immediately realized that the king's visit was not just a casual stopover, but that he had set his sights on his immense fortune. During the banquet, the king mentioned that years of war had drained the country's resources, and Peyrac, keen to avoid disaster and prove his loyalty to the king, decided to reveal his biggest secret, the hidden gold mine. Soon, everyone descended into the mine via an elevator, with Peyrac explaining the daily operations of the gold mine. He also assured the king that the gold mine was his, he could access its riches at any time. Upon hearing this, the king's face lit up with a smile. Just as everyone gathered to watch the gold being forged, an accomplice among the servants secretly sabotaged the elevator. Soon after, the king, now in control of the gold mine, was about to leave in satisfaction, but as he approached the platform, the sabotaged elevator suddenly malfunctioned. The king began to fall, but in a quick move, Peyrac managed to stop the mechanism with a wooden stick, saving the king from a dangerous fall. The king, furious and shaken, stood up without a word and left the mine. Watching the king leave in anger, Peyrac knew that disaster was imminent, and the servant who had been paid to sabotage the elevator was quickly silenced. That evening, the archbishop, who had been plotting against Peyrac, added fuel to the fire, further accusing him in front of the king. The paranoid king, believing the archbishop's words, hurriedly left Peyrac's castle that same night. Peyrac was arrested by the king's guards on charges of attempting to murder the king and plotting rebellion. Innocent, Peyrac did not resist but laid down his weapon and surrendered. He believed that the king, to whom he had sworn loyalty, would eventually clear his name. The guards allowed him a brief moment to say goodbye to his wife, and after his arrest, Angélique became the mistress of the castle, taking on the responsibility of running all affairs. She did everything she could to try to rescue her beloved Peyrac. She sought help from all of Peyrac's influential friends, but in the end, no one could help her. They all claimed that it was a royal order, and unless the king himself commanded it, no one could save her husband. Determined to save Peyrac, Angélique set off for Paris to personally seek out the king, but as soon as she arrived in Paris, she was already being watched. Angélique hoped to stay with a friend, but because Peyrac had been accused of attempting to murder the king, no one wanted to associate with them. After much struggle, she finally found a temporary place to stay, but getting into the palace to see the king was still a nearly impossible task. Meanwhile, Peyrac, imprisoned, signed a document pledging to give 1/3 of his wealth to the king in an effort to prove his loyalty and innocence. Realizing she couldn't see the king immediately, Angélique decided to hire a lawyer to defend Peyrac. However, because Peyrac's arrest had been ordered directly by the king, no lawyer was willing to take her case. Finally, Angélique found a righteous, determined lawyer who had long been marginalized by the elite. To save Peyrac, she bravely entered a small tavern to find him, but as soon as she entered, she was stopped by a drunken man. Without warning, the drunkard grabbed her and forcefully pressed her against the wall. She struggled with all her might, but the man was too strong, and she couldn't break free. The other patrons stood by, watching coldly. Luckily, a large dog with a sense of justice rushed to her rescue, barking loudly and attacking the drunkard. Angélique narrowly escaped, and the dog's owner was the very lawyer she had been searching for. But to her surprise, this lawyer, once an advocate for justice, had been ostracized for his integrity and was now a broken man, drowning in alcoholism. Seeing the once proud lawyer in such a state, Angélique was filled with disappointment and prepared to leave. But the lawyer suddenly spoke to her, saying, "Your Peyrac was arrested by the king himself. In this entire country, who dares to oppose the king? The only lawyer willing to take on this case is probably me." The lawyer, having nothing left to lose, decided to take a final, reckless chance, hoping it might lead to a breakthrough. The lawyer took on the case to clear Peyrac's name. After understanding the case, he immediately visited Peyrac in prison to get to the bottom of the entire incident. The lawyer proved to be capable. Although he couldn't free Peyrac at the first trial, he successfully delayed the case. As soon as the trial ended, someone came to threaten the lawyer, urging him to withdraw. When the lawyer stood firm, they offered him a large sum of money to join their team. But the stubborn and righteous lawyer replied, "Even the king's orders cannot violate justice. I will win this case." Seeing that the lawyer wouldn't budge, the other party left in anger, and Angélique, who had been hiding around the corner, saw everything clearly. After days of maneuvering, Angélique finally got a chance to meet with the prince. With great sorrow, Angélique told the prince of Peyrac's unjust situation, seeing him as a lifeline to save her husband. Without hesitation, the prince agreed to help Angélique. However, what Angélique didn't know was that the true mastermind behind the servants' sabotage of the elevator and the attempted murder of the king was actually the prince. Her Peyrac had simply become a scapegoat in the prince's plot for power. Unaware of the prince's true intentions, Angélique thought this was a new opportunity to clear Peyrac's name. But as she and her maid left the prince's palace, the maid walking ahead was suddenly stabbed to death. Panicking, Angélique quickly turned and fled, narrowly escaping with her life. She then rushed to find her cousin, who worked as a guard, but when they arrived at the scene where the maid had been killed, they found the body had already disappeared. Realizing the danger, Angélique knew that staying here could cost her life. She begged her cousin to help her escape, and they planned to leave the city that very night. However, on their way, a masked man suddenly jumped onto the carriage from above, quickly killing the coachman. At the same time, several assassins surrounded the carriage. Knowing they were outnumbered, her cousin bravely drew his sword and stepped out of the carriage. Angélique quickly followed, hiding behind her cousin. Seeing the danger they were in, a rogue adventurer appeared and rushed to their aid. A chaotic battle ensued, and amidst the fighting, Angélique seized the chance to escape quickly, but two assassins followed her closely, relentlessly pursuing her. In a desperate flight, Angélique ended up at a dead end, where the two assassins, seeing her beauty, felt it was a pity to kill her outright. So, they pinned her to the ground and decided to have their way with her first. Angélique struggled helplessly, crying out, but there was no one around to help. Just as she was about to give up, her cousin and the rogue adventurer arrived in time, and she was saved. Her cousin gave a pouch of coins to the adventurer as thanks, but the adventurer refused to accept it, and his voice echoed in Angélique's mind, leaving her with a strange sense of familiarity. Back home, Angélique, in a fit of anger, cut off her beloved long hair, dyed it black, and disguised herself in a completely different appearance. Her goal was to avoid being recognized by the assassins who were still after her. The righteous lawyer found her a temporary hiding place and even bribed the prison guards to let Angélique into the prison. After several days, Angélique finally saw Peyrac again, who had been unjustly imprisoned. Seeing Peyrac, who had been tortured beyond recognition, Angélique felt a deep, silent sorrow. She quickly stood up and rushed into his arms. Peyrac urged Angélique to leave Paris as soon as possible, not wanting her to risk her life for his rescue, but Angélique insisted on staying and sharing his fate. While Peyrac, after much contemplation, finally pieced together the truth, he believed that the true masterminds behind his wrongful imprisonment were the prince and the archbishop. To confirm his suspicions and save Peyrac, Angélique and her cousin decided to venture into the archbishop's home under the cover of night to find evidence. Although they were almost caught and narrowly escaped death, they eventually found a letter in the archbishop's study, which revealed the prince and the archbishop's conspiracy to murder the king and frame Peyrac for the crime. They shared the contents of the letter with the messenger who had previously tried to persuade them to obey the king's orders. The messenger realized the gravity of the matter, and with his help, Angélique, disguised as a maid, successfully entered the royal palace. She finally had the chance to tell the king about Peyrac's injustice. She told the king that she had figured everything out, and handed over the letter she had struggled to find. The king read the letter, and in a fit of anger, he turned to look at the prince, his younger brother. The prince immediately felt guilty and couldn't meet the king's eyes. But Angélique never expected that the king, having just ascended the throne and feeling insecure in his rule, didn't want the government to be thrown into turmoil because of a letter. Out of his brotherly affection, the king couldn't bring himself to convict him and declared the letter to be a forgery, burning it to ashes. Seeing the king's actions, the prince bowed deeply, grateful to the king, but the king's next words threw Angélique into utter despair. The king declared, "No matter what, your lover must be convicted." Angélique couldn't believe the king would use her husband's life to solidify his own reign. She screamed in anger, pleading desperately, but it was all in vain. In the end, Angélique could only watch as Peyrac was sentenced by the court to be executed by burning at the stake for attempting to murder the king and plotting a rebellion. The following day, Peyrac would be taken to the central square and burned alive, his body reduced to ashes, his soul scattered. Every word read by the judge felt like a knife, stabbing Angélique's heart again and again. The lawyer who had been defending Peyrac was furious at the court's verdict and was arrested for disrupting the trial. In her complete despair, Angélique decided to take one final risk. She ventured into a den of thieves, bandits, and criminals, a dangerous gathering place. Summoning all her courage, she entered the crowd of misfits. She hoped these people could help her rescue Peyrac, who was about to be executed. In return, she promised to share the vast amount of gold hidden in Peyrac's castle. This gold was the fortune Peyrac had accumulated over most of his life. The news of Peyrac, the count, being captured and imprisoned had spread throughout the streets and alleys of Paris. Many people, drawn by the gold, volunteered to join the prison break, and to Angélique's surprise, she saw the masked adventurer who had helped her a few days earlier. When the adventurer removed his mask, Angélique realized he was the coachman who had always secretly admired her. The coachman joined the effort to rescue Peyrac, not for the gold, but for Angélique. Even though Angélique was now a wife and mother of two, his love for her had never changed. For Angélique, he was willing to give up everything, even his life. The next morning, the execution stake in the central square was set up. Glaringly bright under the sun, the curious crowd gathered in the square, eager to watch the spectacle. Led by Angélique and the coachman, a group of outlaws made their way toward the prison through the sewers, then rushed in and broke through the prison gates to free Peyrac. When Angélique, amidst the chaos, reached the cell where Peyrac had been held, she discovered that Peyrac had already been taken to the square. She immediately led the group toward the central square, but by the time they arrived, she saw that Peyrac was already consumed by flames. She was too late. She watched helplessly as Peyrac's body turned to ashes, and the crowd cheered. praising his execution. To them, Peyrac was a traitor who had tried to murder the king. They had no idea about the conspiracy and the injustice behind the fire. Meanwhile, the prince had issued a death sentence for Angélique, ordering her to be completely eliminated. To escape the prince's pursuit, Angélique fled for her life, but a great river lay ahead, blocking her way. Behind her were the soldiers chasing her life. After a moment of hesitation, Angélique, who couldn't swim, resolutely walked into the deep river. She would rather drown in the water than die from the prince's soldiers' arrows. Step by step, she moved deeper into the river, the water gradually rising to engulf her body. At the moment of near death, all the experiences she had with Peyrac flashed before her eyes. A reluctant encounter, Angélique's angry wedding, Peyrac's tender care, and her own avoidance and retreat. Their repeated clashes, Angélique's tear falling from the corner of her eye, Peyrac's life and death duel for Angélique, and Angélique's hesitation and resolve in front of the mirror, as well as their first night together as husband and wife. From hatred to love, from love to commitment, until the final moment of Peyrac's departure, their relationship had been fraught with difficulties, and she never imagined it would end this way. At that moment, she thought she would finally reunite with Peyrac in heaven, a place with no politics, no conspiracies, no framing, only simple love. But when Angélique opened her eyes again, she realized she wasn't in heaven, and the person she saw wasn't Peyrac. It was the coachman who had always admired her. It turned out that Angélique, after plunging into the river, had been rescued by the coachman at the last moment. Not only did the coachman save her, but he also teamed up with Angélique's cousin and the righteous lawyer to find a woman who had drowned days earlier and was now unrecognizable to replace Angélique's identity. The prince, who had been relentlessly hunting Angélique, finally believed the news of her death. The castle and all of Peyrac's estate were confiscated and seized by the king. Now under a new name and identity, Angélique lived a homeless, wandering life on the streets of Paris with her 2 children. One day, she saw the royal procession. Angélique furiously told her children, "The man in that carriage is the one who killed your father. You must remember this deep hatred. One day, we will clear our names and take back everything that was once ours." I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.